Right now, I am standing in the very heart and center of Santiago, Chile. In 1541, the city of Santiago, which is now a sprawling metropolitan area of 7 million people, one of the largest cities in Latin America. It all started here in 1541. This was the first city established by the Spanish and would mark the beginning of the Spanish colonial period. This square is called Plaza de Armas. I don't know if I said that. But right behind me is the Metropolitan Cathedral of Santiago. This is the most important Catholic cathedral in the country, and it's kind of the mother church of the whole of Chile. This is the headquarters of what I believe is called the Archdiocese of Santiago. And 40% of the population of Chile, a country of about 20 million people, lives here in the Santiago area. So you can imagine how important it is. A beautiful structure. I was in there just a few days ago. All right, we'll go this way. We'll go down the street. All right, now we're gonna go down the street this way. Just 1 block away is the former National Congress of Chile. And we'll talk more about that and the government of Chile when we get there. So, like I said, in 1541, the Spanish colonization of Chile began. Santiago was the first city to be established and has remained the largest and most important city to this day. But they established many other cities. They established many other cities in Chile, south of here.
How are you, Mariano? How are you? Hello.
And then we have some friendly locals practicing their English. Anyway, many cities were established south of Santiago, places like Valdivia, but they were destroyed during a massive Mapuche uprising. The Mapuche are the largest indigenous Amerindian group here in Chile, and the Spanish and Mapuche were constantly fighting for control of southern Chile. And indeed, southern Chile was never colonized during the Spanish colonial period. In the early 1800s, Spain would fall during the Napoleonic era when it was invaded by France. And the King of Spain was deposed, and Napoleon put his brother on the throne. Now, many countries in Latin America and Hispanic America wanted independence. The native Criollo elite, that is, Spaniards, Europeans who were born in the Americas, they felt like they were not getting enough respect and enough power from the peninsulares. That's the Spanish, the Europeans who were born in Spain. And so across Hispanic America, there was revolts. And in this period of chaos and turmoil, basically every country in Hispanic America became independent. Now we can see here, we'll go this way. You can see behind me the former National Congress building of Chile. I think this building's like 200 years old. It was in use until 1973. In 1973, there was a military coup launched by a Chilean general whose name was Augusto Pinochet against the government of Salvador Allende. Now, Salvador Allende was elected democratically, but he was by far the most left-wing president that Chile had ever had. And so this really freaked out the right-wing elements of Chile's society, the church, the corporations, the military. And so there was a coup launched in 1973 by Augusto Pinochet, and in one day the government fell. Salvador Allende killed himself, and Augusto Pinochet took control of the government and would be the dictator of Chile for 17 years. In 1988, they organized a referendum where Chileans could vote yes or no on whether or not to continue the dictatorship or to reintroduce democracy. And by a actually fairly narrow margin, the Chileans voted, I think, like 54% to end the dictatorship and to reintroduce democracy into Chile. And so Chile has been largely governed by a central-left coalition ever since. This here is the Supreme Court. That's the Supreme Court of Chile. A very beautiful neoclassical structure. Now, the former National Congress building that we passed by just a block ago, that building wasn't in use during the period of dictatorship and has not been put into use again because the Congress building was actually moved to Valparaiso, the second largest city in Chile, the main city on the coast. The government said they wanted to decentralize the federal government. I have been there, I've seen the new National Congress building, and it is, quite frankly, an ugly, brutalist monstrosity that is completely out of character with the rest of the surrounding old town that it's put in. Personally, I would much rather see the Congress return here to the beautiful old neoclassical structure, but c'est la vie, such is life. Now, Chile is actually one of the most stable and prosperous Hispanic American countries. The standard of living, the average income, the levels of human development are higher here than almost anywhere else in Latin America. Now, this is for a number of reasons. The government has pretty consistently pursued pretty solid economic policy and has been relatively stable and uncorrupt by the standards of Hispanic America. Next, Chile has only 20 million people, but a huge amount of land and natural resources. And to this day, I think something like 25% of the economy comes from the mining and export of aluminum alone. So this is a country with a lot of resources and not that many people. And then also, Chile has a pretty large European population. Demographically, Chile is a little more than half European. Knowing exactly what percentage of Europeans there are here is a little bit difficult, but we can look at genetic studies, and we can also look at self-identification on the census. Now, in Chile, a lot of people will identify as mestizo, which means mixed in Spanish, which is a very vague and amorphous category. And the reason for this is that it's not as popular or cool, you might say, to identify as being Amerindian. But in reality, there's almost no one here that is exactly 50% European and 50% Amerindian. In reality, the mestizo population, the people who identify that way, are probably about maybe 70% Amerindian and then maybe 30% European. So in the center, this is a little bit more of a rundown area. It's not quite as nice. If you go here, well, this particular street we're on is fine, but the center in general is a little bit more rundown. You'll see garbage, you'll see people begging and stuff. This is no longer the financial and business center of Santiago. I was actually there today. It's in the commune of the city, I think it's called Las Condes or something like that. But the principal neighborhood in the east is called Barrio Golf. And if you go there, you'll see that the demography is actually very different than here in the center. In fact, perhaps the vast majority of people that you see walking around in the financial and business hub of Santiago look like people that you might see walking around in Spain. Of course, it's a little bit of a different situation here in the center. Like many cities in the Americas, the center has not been maintained as well, and so there's been a lot of poverty. Additionally, Chile actually has one of the highest percentages of migrants, foreigners, as a percentage of their population. I think it's about 10%. People from all across Latin America, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Dominican Republic, they all come here because they're able to make more money and enjoy more security than they would in their home country. Now, of course, I'm sure many of those people would rather go to Spain or the United States or even France, where there's more money to be made. But it's likely easier to live here without documents, without proper authorization than it is to live in those other places. Well, you know, there's not so much more to say. We're just going to end the video here at the presidential palace. I think it's called La Moneda. I think it used to be the foreign exchange buildings. It's something related to money. But now it's the presidential palace, a very lovely building. It's, I think, just one more block ahead. We'll end the video there and we'll call it a night. Right now it's about 7:30 at night. Sunset is at 8. So as you can see, there's no direct sunlight on me, very nice. But the city is really shutting down. You've probably seen, as we've been walking and talking, you've probably seen a lot of shutters. The businesses here will pull down metal grates over the front of them when they close for the night. That's not as common in the United States and some other European countries around the world, but that's very common, very typical here in Latin America. Let's see, dead air, can't have that. What more is there to say about Chile? Chile's coastline is, I do believe, the longest kind of continuous coastline of any country in the world. In fact, if you were to put Chile over the top of Europe, I believe the coastline of Chile would stretch from something like the Ural Mountains in Moscow, or in kind of central western Russia, all the way to Lisbon, Portugal. So this is an incredibly long but skinny country. It's only something like 100, 150 miles. It depends, varies. From the coast to the Andes Mountains. The Andes Mountains, the second tallest mountains in the world after the Himalayas in Asia. In fact, here in Santiago, if you look, we unfortunately can't see it here because there's too many buildings, but if you're a little bit further east, like in some of those nicer neighborhoods that I was mentioning, you can actually see snow-covered mountains. And right now, today it was very hot. It was more than 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I am an American. And, well, we should have gone one more block to go to the presidential palace. So we'll kind of go the back way here. We're almost there. But yeah, it was more than 90 degrees today. It's kind of the end of the summer here in Chile. And there was snow on the mountains. So yeah, it's a very narrow country, very mountainous, but full of resources, very beautiful, great weather. Santiago is actually kind of at the border between the more fertile part of Chile, which is to the south of here, where there's more rain, and then the more arid north. In fact, the Atacama Desert, which is north of here, it's in between Peru and Chile. It is the driest desert on earth. And here in Santiago, though it looks fairly lush, there's a lot of trees around, the city only gets about 9 inches of rain a year. So it actually only gets like a inch or two more rain than Phoenix, Arizona. So it's much more arid than people realize. When you look out at the hills and mountains surrounding Santiago, a lot of them are completely bare, just brown, rock and dirt, devoid of trees and grass. It's quite amazing. All right, we're almost at the presidential palace. And that's where we'll conclude things. I must say, I've enjoyed my time here in Chile very much. It is visually more developed, more wealthy, absolutely, than other places that I've been to in Latin America. They're doing a good job here. And, if you're a Chilean and you're watching this, pat yourself on the back, because you guys are doing a lot of things right here. Now, of course, to an American or, a Briton or a German or French, Italian, or other European, this would still be probably a somewhat third world country. You're still going to see stray dogs around. You're still going to see a lot of poverty, people living in hovels and stuff. But it's noticeably better than most other parts of Latin America. It really is. All right, well, this is it. Technically the backside of the presidential palace, but here it is. Well, I hope you enjoyed my little tour of the historic center of Santiago, my little spiel about what it's like to live here in Chile, the history of Chile. And we'll end things here with the presidential palace, and of course this view of a massive Chilean flag behind me. Unfortunately, no breeze right now, so you can't really see it. But there we go. All right. Until next time. Ciao.